Yeah, so the Game of the Year nominees for the Game Awards for 2024 have just been announced, and something is missing. It's almost a crime that it wasn't included. You might go as far as to say that it's heresy.
Finally, our global TGA jury, of which I am not a member, has selected the following 6 games as nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards 2024.
I don't have a problem with most of these nominees. I love Metaphor ReFantazio. You can check out my video about that in the description. Astrobot is great. It's one of my favorite platformers since probably Celeste. I never finished Black Myth Wukong, but I can see why people would put it on their list. I want to get back to that at some point. Balatro is rock solid and maybe is the most addicting game of the year, and I think it should be in the conversation because it's kind of different from everything else that's on the table, no pun intended. And for most of this year, I thought Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was a shoo-in for not just the Game of the Year for the Game Awards, but my personal Game of the Year, which now it's pretty obvious what I have a problem with. I guess the biggest issue that I have is Shadow of the Erdtree being a nominee, considering that it is technically a DLC. Now, I get that it is a DLC that delivers more than most video games today do. But I think that says more about the nature of video games in general than it does about it as a DLC. And not to mention, the content for Shadow of the Erdtree is inaccessible to anyone who hasn't made it to a certain part of Elden Ring. And now I know what you might be thinking, you might say, well, get good. It's like, but if we're talking about Game of the Year, we're talking about something that should be playable or something that we could recommend to people as the best thing that you can experience. Well, most people aren't going to be able to experience this. Well, maybe not most, but a lot of people won't be able to experience it. And I think you should be penalized as a candidate if people can't access the content of your game. But let's quit beating around the bush. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 should be here, and the fact that I'm so passionate about that really surprises me. So I heard the buzz of Space Marine 2 and how it's unapologetically your classic mid-2000s action shooter game, how it feels like Gears of War meets 2016's Doom. And I have to admit, I heard that there was no direct modern social commentary, and I thought, okay, that might be kind of refreshing to play. And I have to say, all of that got me interested. Now, I was in the middle of playing Metaphor ReFantazio whenever the hype kind of reached its peak, so I put off playing it, but instead I spent many hours before bed, not like in one single night, but every single night, listening to and watching Warhammer 40k lore videos. I've actually even recently gotten into painting the figures for the Warhammer game. It's been a real blast. It's been a fun time, and I love getting my hands on some paint and getting my hands dirty a little bit. So as someone who is completely new to the Warhammer 40k universe, I invested quite a bit of time and money with just that little smidgen of hope that Space Marine 2 would be something that resonated with me. And you know what? It did. It really, really did.
Jump pack review. By the primer. Tentative bioscience down 90%, unfallen.
Actually, Space Marine 2 didn't just live up to the hype for me. You know, surprisingly, in this world of hot takes and hyperbole, I think somehow Space Marine 2 is underhyped. I don't know how you can play Space Marine 2 and not just be completely blown away by its sense of scale. I guess we associate scale with open worlds these days, but the linearity of Space Marine 2 is a benefit. It allows every moment to be jam-packed with a preposterous amount of detail served in monstrous portions. Experiencing these chaotic battlefields actually gave me chills, and this is just early stuff. You better believe that Space Marine 2 does the classic video game thing of getting more and more absurd as you progress through the campaign, but it works. And never once does it point to what it's doing like, hey, can you believe what's going on here? No, in fact, the game I don't think really has any jokes at all. And yet it isn't a miserable slog to get through. Space Marine 2 is fun without trying to convince you that it's fun. Everything it does it does to serve a purpose for the game and the world that it's building and allowing you to be a part of. And that might be the single greatest thing about Space Marine 2. I think that there is an argument that Space Marine 2 is the greatest paced video game of all time. The story doesn't stop moving, and it doesn't give you a lot of options to distract you from the story or the mission at hand. But if you want those larger waves of enemies, the weapon and gear customization, it's all there in the secondary game mode. But that's all optional. It's there if you want it. You're not penalized for not having the right loadout. This might sound stupid, but Space Marine 2 just feels like a game that wants you to play it. And for it to not be included in the conversation for Game of the Year feels really wrong to me. It'd be like if you didn't include Doom in the conversation in 2016. Was Doom my Game of the Year in 2016? No, actually that was Persona 5. But Doom deserved the recognition, obviously. Now, ultimately, I don't really care about the awards themselves. I could pick what my Game of the Year is. I don't need someone else to tell me what is the Game of the Year. But I do question the judging jury for the Game Awards, and maybe the system of that as well. There isn't a stage this big to recognize developers and the hard work they've put in and the accomplishments they've made. And this is the biggest stage to celebrate that and to encourage that and encourage them to continue to do really good work and to encourage them to create the games that we want to play. And I know this is all subjective, and I might just be over-invested because I just finished Space Marine 2 and it really surprised me and I really liked it. But I can't help but feel like games media whiffed big time on this one. But how do you feel? Shadow of the Erdtree be here over Space Marine 2? Should another game be in the nominees over Space Marine 2 and Shadow of the Erdtree? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I can't wait to hear from you. And don't forget, the Emperor protects. Take it easy.